Hey guys, GimmeMoarFrames here. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to get the best FPS you can in ARMA 3 and DayZ Standalone. I'm going to try and keep this as quick as possible. Step 1, I shouldn't really have to explain this, but make sure that you've got the latest drivers for your graphics cards and everything else in your computer. Step 2, disable core parking. I'll give you the link in the description. You want to download this tool and then go to High Performance and then click Make Active. And then you're done. This should help with some FPS drops on certain computers. Step 3, this is the one that helped me the most. Again, links in the description. You want to download the zip, and then when you get into it, go into these folders and then click the exe file. You need to find out which username ARMA 3 or DayZ runs under. You'll see it here in the task manager. This is usually whatever your Windows login name is. You need to type it in here, click privilege, and then make sure that this is clicked here. Then restart your computer. For me, this gave another 10 frames per second in game. Bear in mind, this only works on 64-bit operating systems with more than 8 GB of RAM. Step 4. This is mainly for ARMA 3, but I have tested it in DayZ Standalone and it works there as well. Again, this tweak requires a 64-bit operating system and 8 GB of RAM. After you've downloaded it, go to ARMA 3 or DayZ in Steam, click Properties, and then go to Local Files, and then Browse Local Files. Once you've done that, open the zip that you've just downloaded and go into this binary folder here. You want to drag this into the DLL folder. This is in ARMA 3 and the DayZ folder, so whichever one you're using, and then you're done. Apparently this can cause stability issues for some people, but don't worry, this isn't enabled until we put in something in the startup parameters. So if you have any issues, just leave out this particular setting. Step 5, set up your startup parameters. To do that, you right-click on ARMA 3 or DayZ, go to Properties, and then Set Launch Parameters. I'll start with the ones that apply to everybody. First up, we have -no benchmark. Then -no logs, -no pause, -no splash, and finally -world equals empty. Now we move on to the ones that are specific to your computer. If you have a computer with hyperthreading, like an i7, which is what I have, you should type in -enable HT. If you don't have a CPU with hyperthreading, like an i5 or an AMD, then you can use -CPU count equals, and then however many cores you have. So for an i5, that would be 4. If it's an AMD 8 core, then you would put 8 here. Finally, we have to set the parameter to change the memory allocator that we downloaded in the previous step. To do this, you put in -malloc equals tbb malloc. I haven't personally had any issues with this, but if you do have any problems, then just leave this parameter out. Step 6. Editing the arma3.cfg or DayZ.cfg. Go to C drive and then users, and then whatever your username is, then my documents or documents, then ARMA 3 or DayZ. Then you'll want to find this CFG file, arma3.cfg. And what you want to look for is GPU max frames ahead and GPU detected frames ahead, which you'll find here. GPU detected frames ahead will normally be on 3, I think, but you want to change that to 0. And then GPU max frames ahead, you want to change to 4. And then you just exit out of that and save it. If you're watching this for DayZ Standalone, then instead you go to DayZ and then DayZ CFG. Change GPU max frames ahead to 4, GPU detected frames ahead to 0, and then save it. This will help smooth out your frame rate. Now for the final step, which is setting the in-game settings. If you're watching this for DayZ, then you can click this link here to skip to that, but I'm going to cover ARMA 3 first. I've left my frame rate in the top left corner so that you can see what effect it's having, but bear in mind that I have quite a high-end computer, so I do have quite a good frame rate here. First of all, go to Controls and then Mouse, and make sure that the mouse smoothing is on the lowest setting. This doesn't actually affect your frame rate, but it does make things feel a lot smoother. Now onto the video settings. Leave sampling at 100%. Texture I would leave on ultra or very high. Objects, set that to low. It doesn't affect the visuals that much, and it helps the performance a lot to set it to low. Terrain I would set to standard or low. Now if you have a good graphics card, you can probably have your shadows on ultra, but if you're going for max frames, then you should disable shadows. I personally leave it on, but it's up to you. Particles I would set to low. Clouds, set that to low as well. And then picture in picture, set that to disabled. This enables mirrors in cars and stuff like that, and you don't really need it. HDR, I don't really feel like it affects my frame rate that much, but you can set it to low. And dynamic lights, that also doesn't seem to affect frame rate much, but again, set it to low if you want, or leave it on ultra. It's your choice. If you are going to use shadows, then you can actually change the visibility settings on the right here, and you can set them to 50 or 100. Personally, I leave it on 100. And then finally on this page, you have the overall and object visibility. This affects your FPS quite a lot, so turn it down as low as you comfortably can, but bear in mind that this does make buildings disappear that are further away. Ultimately, this setting is your choice, but if you're going for maximum frame rate, then the lower the better. Next up, we go to display. And if you have VSync enabled, then you'll want to disable that. And finally, we have this page here. All of these post-processing effects I don't find affect my performance at all, but I don't really like any of them, so I turn them all down to 0. Next, you have ambient occlusion. If you have a good graphics card, then you should be fine on high, but if not, then set it to disabled. Caustics, set that to disabled if you're going for max frames. For anti-aliasing, again, it depends on your graphics card. If you have a good one, then having it higher won't affect your frames that much. But again, if you have a lower end graphics card or you're going for max frames, then set that to disabled. Personally, I have it set to 4 times, and then I have this one set to all trees and grass because it just doesn't affect my performance much and makes things look nice. For this setting, set it to SMAA Ultra. It smooths things out a bit and it doesn't really affect your performance, so that's quite a good thing to use if you have a lower end computer. And then finally, for anisotropic filtering, or however you pronounce that, I set this to Ultra, and even when I had a lower end graphics card, I didn't find that it affected performance much at all, but it does make things look a lot nicer. Basically what it does is makes textures look better at angles. So just set that to Ultra. Finally, we have the settings for DayZ Standalone. I have everything set to pretty much the maximum at the moment, and as you can see, I'm barely scraping 30 FPS. So, first of all, just like with ARMA 3, turn down mouse smoothing. I find it doesn't affect your FPS, but it does make things feel a lot snappier. Next up, we go to the video settings, and we disable VSync. You won't notice a huge difference straight away, but once we change some more settings, there'll be a big difference. Next up, we have the texture settings. Leave video memory on auto, and set texture detail to normal or very low, depending on your system. You can leave texture filtering on very high because it doesn't really affect performance much at all and makes things look a lot nicer. Next, we go to quality settings, and this is where the big differences start to happen. First, set objects to very low. This is the massive one. Watch that. Another 10 or 15 frames straight away. Terrain, I don't think this actually changes until after you've restarted DayZ, but it depends on your video memory, I think. So if you're really struggling for frames, then you can set it to normal or very low. I have it on very high because it doesn't seem to affect my frame rate too much. Clouds, set to disabled. Again, you gain about 3 or 4 frames per second. Shadows, you can set to very low, which gains about 3 or 4 frames per second, or set it to off, which for me doesn't really gain me much more. So if you find the same, then you can just leave it on very low. Finally, we go to the rendering settings. If you have a good graphics card, then anti-aliasing won't be too much of a problem for you. But again, if you're going for max frames, then you'll want to disable that. Edge smoothing I don't find affects my frame rate much at all, but I prefer SMAA on very high, so you can try that too. HDR quality I don't feel makes a big difference for me, but again, if you're going for max frames then there's not too much harm in setting this to very low. On my computer I don't find that ambient occlusion or post-process quality affects my frame rate, but I think on lower end graphics cards it may help to set them to disabled. The final sliders at the bottom are only affected if post-process quality is set higher, as you can see, and I think these things are kind of personal preference, so just set it to whatever you want. And that concludes the video. I hope this has helped some of you. I know that this game is not very well optimized, and actually even if you have a good computer, sometimes you can be struggling to get a good frame rate. On my computer, all of these tweaks combined more than doubled my FPS, and I have a pretty good computer to begin with. With any luck, for those of you with lower end computers, maybe it will help even more. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, and if there's anything else that you'd like some help with, leave a comment and let me know and I'll see what I can do. But until next time, cheers!